Well, excuse me, princess. However, can we leave the 80s without at least talking about the impact The Legend of Zelda had on the overall market?
This is the Triforce of Wisdom, Link. The evil wizard Ganon has the Triforce of Power. Whoever gets both Triforces will rule this land forever. You must help me, Link.
Hey, for you, Zelda, anything.
Nice job, hero.
Hey, excuse me, princess.
First off, Nintendo released a Game & Watch, which were tiny portable mini-game devices. They're simple and novel, but there was zero substance behind most of them. They look cool, and recently we had a re-release of the Game & Watch in the last few years, but aside from the novelty of collecting and storing them just to have them, I can't imagine much mileage was gotten from the devices. But really, you know why we're here. With the recent flourish of decent video game adaptations in movies and TV shows, I must bring up the masterpiece that was The Legend of Zelda cartoon. It initially aired in 1989, but wasn't on DVD till 2005, which is admittedly when I got it. My DVD had 3 episodes on it, and I watched it with incredible excitement. I was immediately put off by how it lacked practically anything to do with what I viewed as correct. Thinking back on that, the date of the cartoon means they only had the first 2 games to go off of. A jumble of pixels, minimal dialogue and character interaction, and the habit of 80s cartoons to be zany, and you have your predictable outcome. The cartoon is cheesy and full of single-episode plots that bear minor similarity to the source material. Link went from heroic young lad to cocky hero aching for a kiss. Sassy, too. Zelda is significantly more independent, which speaks volumes to Ganon's power that he's able to prevent her from escaping. Or, well, it would speak volumes if Ganon wasn't so pathetic.
At last!
No, you can't!
Go away, you pesky insect! No, you imbeciles! Get them like this! Get them, blast you!
Gotcha, Stalpo!
But I have the Triforce, you have lost! Hyrule is mine!
Not yet, Ganon!
out of here, Zelda and Link. You'll pay for this!
He nasally throws tantrums and occasionally comes up with brain-dead schemes to steal the Triforce of Wisdom, the big old MacGuffin that most plots centralize on. I'm certain there's a part where he's just smacking his ass and dancing for way too long. Like, long enough for the plot to go, okay, the heroes can win now. It's like 80s cartoons. I mean, my first date with my wife back in 2011 was to show her this cartoon. We watched the entire thing. And by that I mean the DVD with 3 episodes, because I can't imagine we would have made it through every episode. There's like, thinking back on the DVD section, there's an episode where Link has to guard the Triforce during a festival. There's a spring cleaning episode, and then the episode with Prince Charming, who under no circumstances can get dirty. All the while Link asks for a kiss and somehow, some way gets declined because haha funny. I still have that DVD sitting on my shelf, and I don't think I'll ever watch it again, even for like a bit. Really, there's not much to say. Mario and Sonic also had some animations made of them, so it was kind of a sign of the times to appeal to all available mediums. But there's a reason video game adaptations have been considered bad, and this cartoon is no exception. Kind of going off script again here. I don't know, man. I got this cartoon as a gift from my parents as a kid. You know, we love Zelda in this house. I played, you know, Ocarina of Time at that point numerous times. I was mid into my, like, Wind Waker. I was watching the trailers for Twilight Princess, and then this happened, and I was, like, crestfallen almost. You know that, like, NPC in Dark Souls games where they're sitting there just defeated before the entire game starts? It's just that bit. Just like, oh no, woe is me. There's this cartoon here and I have to watch it. You can watch it too. But, like, you're not gonna make it through it. No one makes it through. And I tried and I failed. Except I succeeded, and I'm worse for it. I also did try to download on, like, free websites the remaining episodes and watched some of them with, like, some mild character development. Like, there is some kind of a love plot going on through this series, but it never culminates into anything, and I can't imagine this was incredibly successful, especially since, you know, it's just not the same thing. Like, if you even look back at the old He-Man cartoons, which has that same 80s energy due to it being its own thing with characters that are, like, developed for that show, you have a narrative structure that is still that level of 80s zany. I mean, I love Skeletor. You love Skeletor. He-Man! But, like, beyond that, the Zelda cartoon doesn't mimic anything that makes a good show. It's just kind of there. You watch it once. You call it a day. There might be a truck in the background. They're coming for me. I said I don't like the Zelda cartoon, so I'm gonna be taking it now. I really wish there was more to like here, and in truth, I really can't fault the writers, because this was admittedly a popular cartoon formula back in the day. I sometimes wonder if I'd like it if we swapped characters and made, like, an original cartoon like this, where they play up the archetypes a bit, and, like, actually, yeah, it wouldn't be that bad. It wouldn't be a cinematic masterpiece for sure, but attaching it to a property that gives an entirely different vibe from the origin creates a negative outlook, even if the end result is well done. I'm sure Nintendo won't do anything off the wall like this in the near future. So the 80s were a thing. The NES had 2 entries setting up the series for success. Often I look back and I feel intrigued at how this franchise got its start. And I do emphasize the word intrigued. A game all about exploration and dungeons, and a game all about combat and platforming, Neither of the two feel particularly familiar in the grand scheme of things. Truth be told, it wasn't until 1992 that The Legend of Zelda truly cemented its formula and, in my honest opinion, created the first true-to-series game. Now this is nostalgia. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past is a hallmark title and an amazing starting point to anyone getting started with Zelda as a whole. We got plot, we got dungeons, we got puzzles, we got a detailed overworld, we got interesting combat, we got more songs in the soundtrack, we got it all. Really, we have a formula that most games would follow for a long, long time. Introduction to the world and plot, 3 main objectives and trials to overcome, succeeding at the trials to unlock the latter part of the game, then a shift into more difficult gameplay and mechanics, beat the game, but in the middle of it all you have collectibles and side quests that'll take you off the beaten path. See, the previous 2 titles I've played, but I can't say I'm familiar with. A Link to the Past, though, I've 100%ed several times. I obviously don't know every nook and cranny, of course, but there's so much joy in exploring this game and seeing all the details the developers lovingly put through Hyrule and the Dark World. A Link to the Past follows the original game's framework more than its sequel. I suppose the crushing difficulty of Zelda 2 was a bit of a turnoff for many players. So we have the broken down concept of exploring the overworld, delving into the dungeons, fighting bosses, and repeating. Broken into that formula, then it's quite easy to say that this series seems repetitive, though I'd argue any game laid out bare like that would seem awfully dull. The important part is the journey. The original Zelda was very one-note. The overworld had very few, if any, tells for secrets or progression, and dungeons were very much defeat enemies and find a way to the next room, fight boss. It is quite literally as simple as it sounds. But A Link to the Past understands that the journey you take within the formula is what makes the game memorable. Sure, it boils down to the same basic premise, but whereas the original's level 1 is turn right, fight bats, gain map, go left, fight skeletons, go north, rinse, and repeat, this one has you entering the Eastern Palace. Inside the palace, you head up a set of small stairs, and suddenly must dodge large boulders coming from ahead, dodging little ones left, right, and then you gotta find your way to the side for a large boulder that covers your entire path. Moving ahead, you get locked in a room with skeletons, like the original, but when you swing at them, they jump back, forcing you to take them out tactically. You could attack them and try and swing on their way down, you could hold out your sword for a charge attack and do minimal damage but they won't jump, you could let the charge attack go and just at the right time to potentially deal twice as much damage but leaving you more vulnerable should you miss, or you could pick up the pots around the room, 4 of them for the 4 skeletons, and toss them at the skeletons, instantly ending them. Just these 2 rooms, not even the whole dungeon, offers a real set of choices to tackle said challenge. But it's not even just the dungeons. After entering the main overworld, your map leads you to a village west of the chapel called Kakariko Village. There you seek information for your quest and learn of the hidden weapon, the Master Sword. You could, in theory, skip this entire part and immediately head southeast to uncover the palace yourself. But on a first playthrough, the encouraged path begins spinning the stronger narrative set forth on this new hardware. The inclusion of a cohesive in-game narrative is a much larger draw for me personally. It's simple, yes, but undeniably contains a charm befitting a grand quest. Running around Kakariko Village has signs up with your picture, you're wanted for kidnapping the princess, which you did do. The opening section has Link scouring Hyrule Castle, its dungeon, and secret waterway to free Zelda from her fate as a sacrifice to obtain the Triforce. Of course, propaganda and word of mouth will have soldiers spreading misinformation that you stole the princess in the dead of night, and the village plays right into that. An elderly woman sits in her home. You enter seeking information on the elder Sahasrara, who initially resided in Kakariko. When she sees you, she smiles and mentions soldiers were indeed looking for you, that they were supposed to call for guards or report you, but there's no way a sweet young boy like Link could do such a thing. Opposite of that, outside there are two wandering people. One will run as fast as they can to get away from you, resulting in you needing the Pegasus boots that allow Link to run at fast speeds. The other will call out for a guard, resulting in the mood shifting, music changing, and a guard coming right for you, locked on to defeat you. You're just here to get information on the Elder and leave on your quest. Kakariko can give you that information in minutes, but taking time to explore opens possibilities and rewards players with flavor. Hidden in a lonely house is the old hideout for a gang of thieves. Downstairs is a block puzzle that, if done correctly, can have you opening every one of the 4 chests for 20 rupees each. There's also a hint for the future regarding the leader of the gang, Blind, who really dislikes sunlight. One house has a person who just thanks you for taking the time to come visit him because his front yard has become so overgrown with vegetation. Another has a sickly kid. Something blowing down from the mountain has made him sick. He'll loan you his bug catching net since he's not feeling well and can't use it. But that little net does more than catch bugs, it also catches fairies. A few doors down, in the middle of the street, is a vendor who's selling a bottle. His last one, in fact. Buy that thing and you've got infinite possibilities. Potions, bugs, and the big one, captured fairies with your bug net. You fall in battle, the fairy will revive you up to 8 hearts. You've got a bar/tavern you enter. You got a guy half asleep talking about his son, another patron talking about fish people up north called Zora that are aggressive and mean, and in the back you see a chest that seems inaccessible, but running around back from outside shifts the perspective and you enter to open it. You've got a well you can jump in northwest of the village that unveils a piece of heart. Damn, I haven't even talked about the pieces of heart yet! As a reward for doing well in minigames, side quests, or exploring, you'll find collectibles called Pieces of Heart. 4 pieces of heart equals 1 heart container, increasing your maximum hearts by 1. You'll get a 1 full heart container at the end of every dungeon completed. Look, I need to reiterate something here. This is the opening village. A Link to the Past is very densely packed and full of intriguing things off the beaten path, and it never pressures you into doing any of its optional content. It's there for you at your leisure. The main quest has more than enough substance to have you leaving the credit scene happy. Now, let's look at the overworld map. It's decent in size, different locations. You'll traverse it looking for 3 different dungeons and meet some of the quirky inhabitants and dangerous monsters along the way. But let's move a bit forward. Once Link obtains the final pendant, completing the trial set before him, it's time to achieve the hidden weapon described earlier, the Master Sword. The blade is hidden deep in the forest north of Kakariko, and many fake swords litter the forest to tempt the unworthy so they may leave the sacred weapon alone and undisturbed. Link wanders through stumps and logs, barely able to see through the dense, thick fog before finally pushing through into a clearing. Moving up, animals scatter in every direction and Link, now alone, stands before the sacred sword. Placing his hands on the hilt and pulling with all his might, the 3 pendants float above his head and reveal his destiny as bearer of the Master Sword. The now familiar tune plays as Link holds the sword aloft. You've done it. You've achieved the legendary weapon. You are a champion, a force for good, a hero. Now you can make your way back to Hyrule Castle and stop the sorcerer Aghanim from his evil deeds. But just as you took the sword, disaster struck. Princess Zelda, kept safe in the sanctuary north of Hyrule Castle, was taken. Link, make your way through the treacherous castle and save her. You climb to the ramparts above instead of the dungeons below. You swing the sword to break the barrier that prevented entry to the upper reaches of the castle. You fight soldiers with swords, shields, and even deadlier weapons. You make your way to the chamber in the back, Zelda held up by the sorcerer. You ready your weapon, press the buttons to charge and save Zelda, and you can't move. He casts his spell, and you fail. Laughing, Aghanim flies back from the hidden curtain and beckons you to follow. Now you're angry. You were outplayed. The Master Sword did nothing but get you closer to your failure. You fight and prevail only for the final card to be revealed. Ganon, the Prince of Evil, sealed away in the Dark World, possessed Aghanim and used his form and body to drag Link into the Dark World with him. He casts aside that wizardly form and Link awakens on a pyramid where Hyrule Castle once stood, a sealed fortress with no way in and likely no way out. You are stuck and confused, and just as many things seem at their worst, a voice appears. The 7 maidens, Zelda included, weren't destroyed. They were sealed away in the Dark World, granted as prizes to monsters hidden in their lairs. Your quest was nearly over, but you were too slow. Now, a new chapter unfolds, and you must journey this dark land and save the maidens. Only then could you make your way to Ganon and defeat him, wresting the Triforce from his grasp. Welcome to the Dark World, hero. The map is the same in size, locations host similarities, but the danger has increased significantly, and your options for exploring are more limited than initially meets the eye. You can't even head west yet, only east. Similarly, your adventure began in the Eastern Palace as your first trial. Now it is a dark and foreboding lair, or at least darker and more foreboding than the Light World variant. But you're stronger now. You have more hearts that allow you to take more hits. Your sword is stronger. You're wiser to the dungeons and their traps. A Link to the Past really steps it up at this stage. You may have gotten stronger, but so has the world, and your preparations and side quest completion before can have a direct impact on your survivability on your journey. How many bottles do you have? Each one could be a potion or a fairy that helps you in dire situations. How many pieces of heart did you collect, allowing you to have more health? Did you fully explore the Tower of Hera? Wait, what? Why that Light World dungeon specifically? Well, let me learn to you something here, and rewind a bit. You just finished the fight and ended up in the Dark World. The boiling sensation is still direct in your mind. You just lost, you're pissed, you're ready to roam around the Dark World, Master Sword in hand, and find the princess and the other maidens, but you're a bunny. Climbing towards the Tower of Hera has you combing through Death Mountain. To enter the tower, you got a glimpse of the portal to the Dark World. Entering it, you take on the form most representative of your inner self. For Link, it is a bunny. You can assume his form is a bunny because his innocence or adventurous spirit, but in reality, it was just a striking image and maintained Link's basic form in the sprite and matched the color scheme for Link's hair. Once you leave the Dark World and enter the Tower of Hera, you climb up on the right and then climb up on the left. In the first dungeon, the item to progress is a bow and arrow, dealing piercing damage and allowing distant switches to be hit with arrows. In the Desert Palace, you obtain gloves that allow Link to lift heavier objects, allowing him to move objects from the path and proceed. In the Tower of Hera, the treasure of the dungeon is the Moon Pearl. It has no immediate or obvious effect, and unlike the other two dungeons, the item is optional at first glance, and the dungeon can be completed without unlocking it. The Moon Pearl allows Link to retain his normal self in the Dark World and is essential for progressing once you enter this section of the game. It's a fun little trick in my books. I personally love the slightly more twisted sense of progression and humor present in later dungeons and mechanics through A Link to the Past. Mistakes can lead to backtracking or confusion and are not limited to game over screens. Like running to a chest in the middle of the room only to have the floor in the dungeon fall through sequentially, one tile after the other in like a spiral. So you're left thinking if you can escape, but you can't. You got the treasure, you take a small bit of damage, chuckle or sigh, and leave. Now, entering the Dark World isn't a permanent transition to the later portion of the game. A big aspect of the game, and what I mentioned earlier in limited exploration, is swapping between Light World and Dark World. Again, we rewind to Death Mountain. On the way up, Link ran into an old man whom he needed to escort up the mountain. You travel through dark caves and end up in his home. His reward to you is a seemingly innocent magic mirror. The intended purpose of the mirror is to teleport you to the beginning of the dungeon you inhabit, but it has another effect. It transports you out of the Dark World and into the exact place on the map in the Light World that you were sitting in. This is your central mechanic throughout the remaining portion of your journey. There are a handful of entrances to the Dark World scattered throughout the Light, and while you can teleport out of the dark with the mirror, you must return to the spot you exited or find a new portal to go back. So now your quest takes you through a section of the Dark World, you gain new traversal items, like the hookshot, you find a new position in the Light World, and explore a different section of the Dark. Eventually, you gather all maidens, Zelda included, and seek your final confrontation with Ganon. I didn't start with A Link to the Past myself. I actually kind of began with, as I will mention later on a bunch, with Ocarina of Time. I actually did that game with my parents when I was 4 or 5 in like 1999, 2000 or whatever it was. We kind of just never had a SNES. It was pretty much NES to Sega Genesis to 64. So I went back to A Link to the Past on the Game Boy Advance re-release that came with 4 swords, and didn't play it much because I've mentioned before I was legally blind, so playing on handhelds, aside from things like Pokemon, was a very difficult endeavor. But when I got my Wii in 2006, shortly thereafter they released the Virtual Console. And that was my first real experience playing A Link to the Past. Funnily enough, in the Game Boy version, it uses Link's Ocarina of Time, like, clips for audio, like when young Link swings his sword and stuff. So when I first played the SNES version and not hearing any of these like voice clips, I was thrown off guard. But you know, it's from as far as I'm aware, it's still the same game. I may look at, when I do 4 Swords, kind of look at the differences, but in reality, it's, you know, it's still A Link to the Past with maybe some minor screen crunch, just because it's a smaller screen. But I adored my time with A Link to the Past. It's kind of like a bit basic through most of the game. I would say it isn't until you get to the Thieves' Hideout, which is like the 4th dungeon in the Dark World, that the game starts throwing a little bit more complexity at you. It gets more difficult. Like the first Dark World dungeon has these turtle monsters that you have to flip with the hammer to then do damage to, and the boss in that dungeon, if you're unprepared, does a ton of damage and can be like a first major huge roadblock outside of just screaming at Moldorm when you fight him at the top of the Tower of Hera and just continuously fall off the dungeon. But I like look at this and start to see the cemented formula and like everything coming together that makes these games kind of what they are, in all honesty. We've only just recently seen in like 2017 a shift away from the formula that's so rigidly defined in A Link to the Past, and you know, for the better, because as long as these games and the developers making them are making something they want to do with this game series, then I'm all for it. Because, you know, if something is made with love and passion, even if it's not necessarily what I loved about it before, we have something that will be fun to a majority of the people, because if I make something I want to play and then I share it to everybody, I'm going to play it alongside the other people, and it creates that bigger sense of game and adventure and love. So, you know, A Link to the Past very clearly shows, okay, we learned from the original game, we learned what we might not want to do in Zelda 2, now we have this near perfect video game in reality. But it's a really simple premise. It's an adventure game first and foremost, and there's so many pieces I'm not talking about here. Again, Kakariko Village is such an amazing, beautiful first start. Not only is the soundtrack phenomenal, but there's just so many little interactions you can have that are leaps and bounds above what we've had before. There's tons of little flavor text. It doesn't really coexist in like this great novel-esque narrative, but you have little interactions here, there, and everywhere that just make this place feel like a home. And you can wander in the wrong direction quite a distance before you realize, oh, I'm going the wrong way. I believe you do have to do the Eastern Palace first, but once that's done, the other two pendants with the Desert Palace and the Tower of Hera, I believe you can do those in a different order, because neither of those two dungeons require an item for the other dungeon. And the Dark World also, I believe, follows a bit of that premise, though there are more limitations to start. You have to do the Dark World, the Dark Palace, the Dark Dimension Palace, yeah. But then after you've done that, a few dungeons after that can be done in a different order, because items from one don't necessarily coexist with items from another. Although I could be wrong on the Dark World, it might be more rigid. Again, that's not how I'm going to play it anyway, which I guess limits my facet on the idea here, because I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the Dark World. It literally labels the dungeons on the map with a number, so I'm going to do the dungeons in the intended order. The sequel in A Link Between Worlds uses a similar map, the same map with alterations, and it's like, you know, that doesn't number them. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in the future. But I know I'm skipping ahead here because of this unscripted bit, which is becoming a problem sometimes. But we have so much going on here that created Zelda as we know it. And I am incredibly grateful to this game in particular. I adore it. I love it. It's fun. It's engaging. It's over before you know it. It's not terribly long. It's kind of got that advantage of a very quick start versus some of the more modern Zelda titles, which take a couple hours sometimes to get going. But the premise and the fact that you can like turn this game on and beat it in a weekend is just, it's adorable. I enjoy it. A Link to the Past is the Zelda game that starts this franchise's complete identity. So many core concepts and ideas began their life here, and the formula would be used again and again for many years to come. To play one Zelda game is to know them all, but at a surface level. To experience each game is to learn the majesty in adventure. A Link to the Past is a legendary journey. A Link to the Past is the spiritual beginning of The Legend of Zelda. It's a bit late into this script to discuss what I'm doing here. Sure, there are many other videos that are better researched, better worded, and better essays all around, but one thing that has always been my strongest asset is my ability to describe what my heart tells me. Emotional reactions are truly the memory we hold closest, because regardless of how logical or explainable something is, we may feel differently. I dart around from thought to thought, even in written form, as my heart excitedly remembers how I feel about topic A or topic B. I remember how it felt as music plays throughout the quest, or how frustrated I was beating back a boss with a hammer. Our emotions are important. They're to be cherished. This entire video is just one emotion after another, guiding my scatterbrained mind through one of the best video game series of all time. It is not my desire or intention to review each game, but to grant an emotional insight into the worlds that have shaped me as a person. At the end of this series, somehow and some way, I want to ignite a passion to play these games, whether it be for the first time or all over again. This is a magical and amazing series, and it'll only get better from here.